my guest today is Tim Hayden, the CEO at Brain+Trust and the Chief of Business Strategy at the Next Practices Group. Tim has been a catalyst for transformational progress within some of the world's largest brands. Part social anthropologist and part strategic business executive, Tim studies human behavior and how media and mobility are reshaping all of business. And all of that to say, you're also a great personal friend of mine, Tim. So thank you so much for joining me in this first drop of episodes of the Brand to Fan show. I'm so happy you're here.
Lauren, I'm so thrilled. I mean, this is a treat for me. I'm so happy for you. I'm excited for you and this show, and I just feel lucky to be here. It's an honor, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Well, okay, Tim, let's start it off with the first question I'm going to ask every guest on the Brand to Fan show. And that is maybe an easy one and maybe a hard one. Time will tell. But tell me a little bit about what are you a fan of right now?
I mean, right this second, I mean, I'm a fan of the Dallas Cowboys. But I mean, it's such it's a long list, right?
Sure.
I'm a fan of the Texas Longhorns. I myself am a Texas State Bobcat. I'm a fan of those guys. I mean, it's football season, obviously, right?
So it sounds like football season.
So I'm a fan of my football teams right now.
Awesome. And then in the business world, who or what are you a fan of? What are you passionate about? What are you telling your clients about?
I'm telling my clients more than anything, about what's going to happen over the next 3 to 4 years as the internet changes. And at the core of it all really is data, right? And right now, the importance of knowing who your customer is and who your customers are. Many brands over the last 15 years have invested in technology to enhance the customer experience, to market to their audiences. And as they've done that, they've lost sight of who their customers really are. They've relegated themselves to clicks and open rates and media performance rather than customer behavior and empathy with the customer. So knowing your customer, I think, is the thing that I'm preachy about the most. I would say I'm a fan of those brands that keep an eye on the ball and have some sense of who I am whenever I transact with them or when I engage with them.
Absolutely. And it's probably no surprise that actually the football fandom and the football season plays so well into this kind of knowing your playbook, because football today is built on statistics. It's built on data.
Absolutely.
When I was in Jacksonville, 10 years ago, the new ownership changed and they put in for the first time, someone who was in charge of player data. And that was kind of the first wave of that, post Moneyball. This has been a big thing. So whether it's sports or business, like data about who's on your team and who you're trying to reach is such a huge part of every business decision that is made today.
Oh my goodness, it totally is. And we'll stick with sports for a second. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. Moneyball was probably one of the best illustrations for us. A great movie, great book before it, and it's changed baseball, right? It is totally changed baseball, but it's changed everything about sports when it comes to analytics and metrics, as you said. A fun thing to think about. It's in the world of sports, but there are companies out there now that will count the number of people in line for the restrooms at stadiums and arenas in order to cue the concession stands with the right number of hot dogs or bags of popcorn, because people go to the restroom before they go to the concession stand, right? It's analytics, right? It's all about that. So, when we think about business, when we think about preparing for what's next, we always have to look a little bit at history and then what else is happening in the marketplace, what's happening around us, going to the restroom and ordering a hot dog, two things that they're interrelated, right?
Yeah. And if you're the marketer or the person who's looking at that to heighten fan experience in a stadium or in a Walmart or in a, insert place you do business here,
right.
Those are the things like what someone's journey has and what the steps they take. You outlined it very clearly, right? You would not get your food and take it to a restroom. Like
Right.
that's a pretty defined path that we just by habit would do dirty things and then clean things, in that order. And so, but if you don't have the data, can you really pay attention and see that at scale?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think, even deeper view on that is, when do people go to the restroom and or the concession stand most frequently or in mass during a sports or maybe a live music event, right? They'll do it in between songs or in between quarters or timeouts, injuries on the field, things like that, which also as a marketer, as someone who is trying to control the fan experience or enhance it, if we'll say that, you've got to balance what it is you're doing and where you're doing it based on thinking about those kinds of things. And of course, more and more as the world has become digital, we can start to understand from an analytics standpoint, from a metrics and measurement standpoint, how we dial those experiences up.
Yeah. And I think this is probably a good time to kind of put in the disclaimer that while we're in this show going to talk about how brands cultivate fandom, I am a huge believer that customer experience, customer touch points, and how those are designed and developed and optimized is a huge part of how someone makes some sort of connection. I think that that's kind of all part of that falling in love with a brand, with an experience that I'm advocating for.
That's right.
And so this show is not just going to be about the sociology of fandom. It's not just going to be about making just an emotional connection, but really designing for any business, any brand, designing those experiences in that way. So just a kind of a note for people who are just starting to listen, as we all are, since this is a brand new show, is that, we are going to talk a lot about a lot of things here, all under the guise of helping people fall in love with you as a brand, as an individual, as a business, and what those kind of what levers we pull to do that, which is why I'm so glad to have Tim Hayden here with me, who has been doing this and doing tech and digital probably for a lot longer than he would rather admit to, and probably since I was, learning how to do the math to analyze all these things in grade school. So
come on now.
Oh, come on. So, well, that kind of leads me to my next question. Well, how have you seen technology accelerate fandom in today's culture?
Well, if you go back 15, 20 years ago, I always share with folks or preface, especially on shows like this, right? I'm a recovering mobile strategist, right? I for a long time, I've always been about audiences. And I guess that's what marketing is about. And the customer experience is all about, is about knowing your audience. But for a long time, I was doing it in the live music and the sports world, and really understanding how, when the smartphone around 2008 and later, when the smartphone showed up, all of a sudden we had this connection between the online and the offline world, right? And it was just as important for you to think about, and I've been preaching about this for a long time, about the offline experience as much as you do and as much as you invest in digital media and the digital experience. Because right now, your audience has a supercomputer in their pocket with a HD production studio in it that goes everywhere with them. So they not only can be engaged at any point, at any location, which you also have to wrap your head around, right? Day parts and when's the right time to send them a message or put an ad in front of them. But also, they've got the ability to capture and share that experience with that HD production studio. And be clear, we're in 2022 now. It's no longer HD, it's 4K. It's an extremely clear and high fidelity signal now that I can use from my smartphone when I share the experiences with the things that I am a fan of, right? The places I go, the experiences I behold, the products I buy, the stores in which I shop in. That's all in play now.
Yeah. Well, tell me a little bit about how the rules have changed, because over the last, from the advent of the smartphone, which was less than 15 years ago, to think about, when I started my social media career, I literally was still doing it on a flip phone or a brick phone,
right?
And not even a BlackBerry, not even tweeting on a BlackBerry, just little flip phone.
Right.
And so you think about how like the technology has made that change. Well, then the people who own the data facilitating the transaction of data, the Googles, the Apples, the Facebooks of the world, they built businesses on, buying and selling data. But
Right.
lately the rules have changed around that, starting with like GDPR and then up to kind of Apple's cookie list movement. So can you talk a little bit, maybe in more layman's terms than sometimes you do, how have the rules changed around personal and user data? And how is that impacting businesses who have started to build their own businesses upon having access to that data?
That's a question that could be answered differently, brand by brand and vertical by vertical, even business unit by business unit within a brand, right? But the table stakes today, if we can start there, are consent management, right? Not just do you accept our cookies, but do we have permission from you to process your data, to store your data, right? That's where we are today, and it's not in everywhere law just yet, but you named a few of them, right? You named GDPR. We have the California Consumer Privacy Act, the California Consumer Privacy Rights Act. Colorado has a law. Maine has a law. There are another 5 states. Don't ask me to list them right this second, but I know there are another 5 states that have laws that go into effect on January 1st, 2023. And they all pretty much say the same thing, that you have to have consent or the customer opting in and granting permission for their data to be processed, or for machine learning, artificial intelligence, things that seem to be on the labels and on the home pages of every technology we use these days. In order for those things to work and to be able to process and analyze that data, which is shared with you by a customer, you have to have their consent. Not only that, they're going to have more rights over time. And obviously it depends on where you are geographically, where your customers are geographically right now. They also have the ability to come to you and ask to see all the data that you're using to target them, to communicate with them, and otherwise to analyze them and people that look like them. Also, the opportunity for them to come in and correct it. To be able to look at what you have and say, that's not right. You're saying I'm single when I'm married. You don't have my income defined right. You have my old address, things like that. And then the last 2 things are basically putting the consumers in a spot where they can tell you to pause using the data they've shared with you. Saying right now, just do not call me, do not send me an email, and do not put an ad in front of me. That's coming. And the last thing, of course, is what happened even pre-GDPR in Scandinavia 20 years ago, was what they call digital suicide, was this ability for a customer to go to a brand and say, delete everything you know about me. Just delete it now, and or allow me to download it, and then I want you to erase it, right? We're seeing that happen already because of what Facebook had with Cambridge Analytica and that scandal several years ago. You're seeing Facebook do it, Apple's doing it, and they're actually making a bit of a public affairs or public relations thing out of it, that they're being more transparent. But this is something every brand's going to have to do.
Okay. So as from the consumer side, when I'm clicking that like annoying pop-up on the bottom of the screen, I should be thinking twice about what that means, what I'm giving permissions to do. And if I decline that, the experience does change in some sites or some things because of what they're not able to deliver. And then if you are building a business on leveraging someone's data, how do you be clear about what the benefits are to share that,
Right.
what someone gets because they're allowing use of their data, and what their experience is better off? Because I think today we're in a place in the world where if a brand is going to send me an email, say an e-commerce brand is going to send me an email, and they've picked out my next outfit, my next patio furniture, something, because they know what style I like, what size I am, those things, and they send me an email, that feels like a really great experience and maybe something worth like transacting data from. But like, if you're a brand building on that, how do you make that exchange not scary? How do you like position that in a way that's, appealing to the audience?
Well, I think everything you just said, right, is how do you message around at every given opportunity that you, the customer, sharing your data with me, the brand, is going to enhance your experience. It's going to have us, we won't say personalized so much because I think that gets a little creepy for some people,
Sure.
but it's going to make it to where it's more meaningful and more relevant, the business we do with you. It's going to put us in a position to where if you have an issue, if you need us from a support standpoint, we can address it much more quickly. And I think more than anything, it's that deeper opportunity to say we're being transparent, and ultimately we're going to give you control of the data that you shared with us, right? That to me is empowering for the customer, and it's a preface for where things could go as time goes on and we see things change with the internet. We might talk about that in a second, but it puts us in a great position to where there's a more fluid relationship between the customer and the brand. Meanwhile, I'm able to put the little outfits in front of you that, I can be suggestive in terms of you bought this and maybe you're going to like this, right? Or you said you like to visit this place, so we've given you 50% off your next visit there, kind of thing, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, like the Amazons of the world, the giant retailers and things, they're starting to dial into this. It's kind of interesting because I'm also thinking about like the success of the do not call list, right? The do not call list came out. Everybody's like, yes. And somewhere along the way, that permissions expired, right?
Right.
And then you start to get the spam again and you're like, wait a minute, I thought I opted out. So I'm just curious from what for consumers, is it going to be easy? Is it going to be as easy as like signing up for a do not call list to control your privacy, or are brands and the gatekeepers of this, are they really protective of that? And like, you can do it, but you have to hit like the secret page on the secret website and then make a call and then put in a secret password. Like, how easy will it be for someone to actually control what the brands know about them?
Well, I think, there's, we've had for several years now, we've had ad blockers, right? Firefox really was the one who came out of the gate, Mozilla, right? And said, here's the deal. We're going to give you a browser that shields you from pop-ups, of course, but also people tracking you as you leave one website, go to another, to a social network, right? Mm-hmm. There was that. I use Brave as my browser, right? It's built on the Chrome platform, so I can use a lot of the same Chrome apps I would use before. But what Brave does is it blocks just about everything that people would want to put in front of me based on some ping or signal that they've got on data that I left behind, or a pixel, as we talk about, right? Pixels and cookies working together to retarget me, right? They stop that. So I think there are things you can do proactively today. You can use a VPN, a virtual private network that shows your location and your IP address to be somewhere in the Seychelles Islands rather than in Austin, Texas, right? There are things that you can do proactively to throw off these systems that would otherwise track us. Apple has been probably most recently, they've been the first to market in terms of even deeper control given to the user in terms of being able to select whether or not any app would be able to track you from the app to your email to the browser, even with Apple TV, even with the things you use on your iPad or your Mac. So as they're doing that, I think we're seeing big tech. They're limiting how other big tech companies and advertising networks are sharing data between each other. They're starting to do that. And I have thoughts on that in terms of where that's going to go next. But at the end of the day, I think, you have to understand that right now, if you're not using something like Dashlane as a password keeper, as a prime example, Dashlane will make sure that you don't use the same password on any two websites, right? That's one thing to help you preserve your identity and ensure that no one's using your password in a bunch of different places or logging to your accounts and committing fraud. But the other side of that is it's also helping you control, to a certain degree, of the integrity of how you're accessing information. And that's right in line with everything else we're talking about. Just taking more control instead of just willy-nilly allowing any old thing to put a mark on my browser and follow me everywhere I go.
And do you think that that's actually a bonus for brands? Like, it's really hard right now when you've done business in one way for 15 years, and then, you know, this kind of cookieless future also ushers in this new Web3, which is all about kind of more ownership of what you have and decentralizing that. So is it a good time to be a brand marketer, or is it a frustrating time? Like, can we paint a little bit of like gold at the end of the rainbow here that people are looking for?
I think so. I mean, you know, in my world, customer data platforms and hybrid cloud environments, right? And using a tool like Snowflake to be able to find information in real time that you need to better serve the customer, to make better, cleaner decisions in terms of what you want to do from a content strategy standpoint, from a marketing or customer experience standpoint. There are things that are happening right now that I think absolutely make life easier or life better for brand marketers today, where brand marketers can focus more on what machines cannot do, right? Machines can do just about anything from an analytics standpoint with business rules and algorithms laid over them. There's a whole lot that machines can do for us. And I think that's good news. I think at the end of the day, what brand marketers are going to have to do is be more creative and more strategic and more thoughtful. They just haven't had that opportunity for a while to be super thoughtful about what it is they're doing or they're planning to do. And I think that's where that's how I'd answer that question, at least, right? Yeah. It's I don't think it's going to get easy. I think it's just going to be it's going to be different. The tools are out there right now to make things more fluid and more manageable, no doubt.
Yeah. And that reminds me of, you know, what you said at the very beginning of the conversation was, you know, focusing on the offline experiences. Like, the online experiences kind of take care of themselves, but that offline connection and how you're meeting people kind of in those quiet steps and what kind of experiences you can drive there, I think is going to be really, really powerful. I know you and I are both paying attention to Web3 and right. How that's emerging. I'm, you know, I don't have obviously all the answers, and I don't know that anybody truly does. Maybe Kathy Hackle, but maybe nobody else. But do you think that brands can win on attention alone?
Okay, hold on.
Oh, did I lose you for a sec?
Yeah, my internet just refreshed. So
okay,
just go repeat this question you're asking me right now.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay.
Okay,
so I know that you and I are both paying attention to Web3 and how that's emerging and how that's going to change and transform both how people are using the web and how brands are going to approach it and how all this works. Maybe nobody has the answers. Maybe Kathy Hackle is the only one that has the answers to what Web3 is going to look like. But when we're thinking about that, a lot of the success that brands have had, influencers have had, has been based on the attention economy over, say, like the last 10 years. Can brands and influencers win on attention alone in Web3?
I don't think so. I mean, I think a lot of brands are going to aspire to, because that's what they've been fighting for over the last decade, right? They're trying to get more time spent listening, more time spent watching, more time in store. You know, they've been in an uphill battle for attention. You know, we can't talk about Web3 without talking about the pandemic, right? And talking about what the pandemic did to accelerate digitization in many ways. Things like curbside delivery, work from home, or remote working, remote transactions, even before you think about delivery, right? It accelerated e-commerce in many ways, but we're seeing now that humans are humans and they're wanting to go back and they're wanting to have offline physical retail experiences as well. I think the same thing is going to happen when we talk about Web3, right? Web3 and thinking about digital commerce and digital values being exchanged from person to person, or monetizing parcels on the internet, whether that's content or it's websites themselves. I think we're still banking on attention, right? We're still banking on the value of attention for that, for those assets to have value. I think at the end of the day, though, the folks that are talking about making the physical world also more, and I'm talking about the real physical world, not the metaverse, not the virtual world. I think those folks that are looking right now at how you can have shared ownership of physical things, I think they have just as much upside. And I guess it still is a question about attention. It still is a question about time invested within being in a specific place and consuming a specific product or service, or beholding an experience when we talk about sports or live music or things like that. Mm-hmm. But I think at the end of the day, it's people get excited about Web3 being the opportunity for the users to own a piece of the internet. I mean, that's a very simple way of explaining it, right? A very elementary way of looking at it. I'm sure some people would accuse me of doing right then, but where I'm going with that is, let's be honest. It's Google, it's Apple, it's Samsung, it's AT&T. It is or it isn't Facebook. That's one to watch right now, right? I don't know what Facebook's role is going to be in all of this going forward, but I can tell you that a lot of the folks that are in our homes and in our pockets right now, that are on our walls in terms of the televisions and the video experiences we have in our homes, they're the ones right now who hold the cards, the channels, and the swim lanes for our time spent, our attention spent for the foreseeable future.
Okay. That's really, yeah, I can see that, where, in each of those businesses that you talked about, they have been relatively successful at cultivating fandom. That you don't get to be one of the world's top 5 best businesses or biggest businesses in the world if you don't have Mac fans or iFans, and you don't have loyalists to the next season that drops on Netflix, or having the next piece of that. So and then you're talking about Web3 and ownership of the internet, and you think about some of the most popular early NFT collections that were nothing until some people got emotionally attached or financially attached. Right. And they've literally built value through their affinity. So they built value for the token of ownership or the collection that they've bought into, not just because they own it. There's not, unless you're, I guess unless you're Ryan Reynolds, you can't really build a brand just by owning it. But even so, so they're building because they're invested emotionally, they're invested not just financially. And to me, that's how I really see Affinity becoming kind of that driver of, truly it can drive economy at some scale. But, what do you think about that? Is Affinity versus attention? Where do you land on those?
Well, let's talk about what's at the basis and the root of affinity and attention, respectively, right? Yeah. It's trust and confidence, isn't it? I mean, I would throw that at you, is to say that I'm defensive about the Apple products that I use, right? Because I'm confident in them. They do what I need them to do, and then some. They sometimes surprise me with new functionality, a new operating system update, sometimes gives me shortcuts and tells me new things I can do with my devices. And maybe that builds more trust and confidence. And I have some affinity for the brand. I'm really happy you're not using the term loyalty, because that's not what it is, right? I do have an affinity for the brand, but it's built on trust and confidence that they are stewarding my experience. We're not even going to talk about data yet, but just the experience I'm having with them, they're ensuring that it meets my needs. which could be a fun contrast when it comes to fans and affinity and sports, because our sports teams don't always win. Our sports team don't always make us proud, right? We always have pride. I say that the true fans always have pride and always get defensive. But at the end of the day, the scoreboard tells a story. The number of penalties on the field, they tell a different story. And we still somehow have some trust or confidence there. Or do we? Is it trust or confidence? Or is it just, what is it?
Yeah, no, I'm giggling because you sound a lot like a true Cowboys fan. Just gonna throw that out there. Just slightly apologizing for things like penalties and injuries, but
yeah. Well, I don't have anything to apologize for right now. 4 weeks ago, everybody says we're going to be at the bottom of the NFC East, and look at us now, right? I'm knocking on wood. We have the Eagles this weekend, so
Well, they've got to lose sometime. Why not this week? So, tell me a little bit about, as we kind of dive into the end of this podcast, I'd really love to know, do you have a brand experience or a story that you can't help but share? Like when somebody asks you about product X, you're like, let me tell you about this story. Like, just tell me something that kind of created your fandom that you're happy to share.
Well, I love sharing this story. It's been a while since I have, but I used to use Silver Car when I rented a car. Audi it was Silver Car before it was bought by Audi. I started using it, and I think the last time I logged into the app, I've used them 50 some odd times. But when I travel, I started using Silver Car because, and before Audi bought them, their tagline was car rental that doesn't suck. That was their tagline, right? Now Audi made them. That was a little off brand for Audi, so Audi made them change that. But what Silver Car did was every car was an Audi A4, and every one of them were silver. And when I booked it, I would book it and I'd land at the airport and I would check in via the mobile app, and they would pick me up right outside the front door of the airport. We'd go to the Silver Car facility. The car they picked me up in is the one they'd allow me to leave my suitcase in. They would hop out and wish me a good day. I would have to scan a QR code. Pardon me, I left that part out. I'd have to scan a QR code on the particular car that I was in, whether it was the one I was in or another one. And that started the rental when I did that. I never had to wait in line. I never had to sign any paperwork. I never had to show my driver's license. I never had to do any of that. It was all very frictionless, right? I didn't have to get on a shuttle with a bunch of other people and stop 3 times at 3 different car rental agencies. All of that friction was taken out. My story is, when I was living in California in 2015, my family, we flew to Texas, back here to Texas, to go to a funeral. We had a family member pass away. We flew into Dallas, and we were going to the funeral in Tyler, about 2 hours east of Dallas. My son at the time was 3 years old. And sure enough, everything I've already told you, they did that at the airport, and they had a baby seat that they had put in the car for me without me having to do anything except just check the mark, put a baby seat in, right? And they did. So they picked us up. We were on our way to Tyler, and about 20 miles outside of Dallas, the car started shaking. And we were late for a family reception the day before the funeral. And all through text messaging, I handed my phone to my wife, Haley, and I said, would you just let them know that the car is shaking, and so they know that it's doing it. We didn't do it. It was like it when we picked it up. So she starts talking to me. She goes, well, they want to know, can they bring us a new one? And I looked and I said, well, we can't waste time. We got to get to see family. So she types that in, and they say, well, what time tomorrow can we bring you a new car? And she said, well, what time can they bring us a car? What are they saying? And I said, well, just let them know where we're going to be. Tell them, I don't want them to have to drive 2 hours, me thinking about them, right?
Sure.
What do they do? They take the time that we want the car. We give them the address. Fast forward to the next morning. A minute before I told them to be there, they text me and say, we're almost there, Mr. Hayden. Would you like to meet us outside and give us the key to the car you were driving? They pulled the car up. They gave the key to the new car to me, no questions asked, took the key to the car that I had been driving, and they drove it 2 hours back to Dallas, right? That put me in a position to where already it was already rental car that doesn't suck, right? It was already that. But what they did in that situation, I went to Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and everybody. I took pictures of the car. I took pictures of the baby seat and just told that story 5 different ways. And, it's to me, we talk a lot about customer service, customer experience, that's personalization without being creepy. That's them throwing everything. It was never about them. It was never them saying, hey, we could get this to you between 8 and 10 in the morning. They said, what time exactly do you need it? And they were there 2 hours away.
That's incredible.
Yeah. And you say that's incredible, but they did it, right? And I have the proof when I get in the account 50 some odd times I've rented from those guys. And that's a big reason why I do that. There are lots of brand stories out there of brands that are doing that, right? American Airlines reconciles your Twitter account with your Advantage account. And if you complain about missing a flight, instead of waiting in line at the counter to get reissued a ticket, they'll just call me up and say, Mr. Hayden, we saw your tweet. We reconciled your Twitter profile with your account. We've gone ahead and booked you on another flight. You're going to need to get to Terminal B right now. If you can, we're saving the plane for you. That kind of experience, having your data together, having your systems together, and working on my terms, right? That's what it has to be.
Wow, that's really, really awesome. And I can't think of a better way to kind of wrap all this up, because you did it right there in that story. It's about data. It was about the audience. It was about, knowing and being able to cultivate a moment that, became a currency for them because of how you took that story and where you shared it and how that is. So I will make sure to reevaluate my travel options next time I come to see you in Austin, and maybe look into different options for rental cars as well. Before we wrap things up, Tim, I just want to ask you one more question. I'm going to ask everybody on the Brand to Fan show, and it's a little self-serving because the Brand to Fan show is presented by FanWagn, the web's only re-commerce marketplace to buy, sell, and collect fan gear.
Re-commerce.
Yes, re-commerce. So just curious, what's your favorite jersey or piece of fanwear in your closet, or one that's been in your closet that you'd love to find again?
I have a Texas State Bobcat baseball hat. It's an Adidas baseball hat, and it has the whack. It has whack embroidered on the side of it from whenever we were in the Western Alliance, the Western Athletic Conference. Now we're in the Sun Belt, which is a whole lot of fun. We're playing App State this weekend. For college football fans, that's a big deal in 2022. That hat has probably been with me. Obviously, just by what conference is on it, it's been with me for a long time. And it's the thing I grab on Saturday mornings in the fall more than anything else. It's like clockwork, right? I just do. I'm proud of it. Even when I was living in California and I didn't have as many Texas State Bobcats living around me, I would still do that, right? But now I'm living in Austin again and back home, and it's one of those things. I have people walk past me and say, "Eat 'em up, cats," just because they see my hat, right? That's probably the one item that is been with me for a long time, and it's still with me every Saturday in the fall now.
Well, that's awesome. That is awesome. I will be sure to take a look, and as FanWagn gets going and we get more inventory, I will be sure to earmark those Texas State and the purple for you and send you an email when I see a couple of things.
Maroon and gold.
Oh, maroon and gold. Sorry, I was thinking about TCU, wasn't I?
You were.
I was. That's a family
frogs.
thing. Yeah. So maroon and gold. My apologies to the Texas Bobcat community who's probably listening in, all of you. My apologies. I will now find my own Texas State gear when I get down to Texas the next time. I'll go thrift some and keep one for myself in penance. So
there you go.
Yeah. Tim, how can listeners keep up with you and follow your work? Where do you, if they were going to connect with you online, where should they go?
Two places I am where my attention is more often than anywhere else is Twitter at the Tim Hayden or on LinkedIn. I am LinkedIn /in linkedin.com/in/saddle up on LinkedIn.
Oh.
But I'm the only Tim Hayden that looks like me. I'll tell you that right now.
Perfect. Well, we'll be sure to link that also in the show notes as well. Tim, it has been my absolute honor and pleasure to have you in the first drop of episodes for the Brain Fan Show. Like most of our conversations, we could probably just keep riffing, but I know that you have places to be in and clients to see. So I want to respect your time and just say thanks so much for making an appearance on the show. And thanks for all your support of myself and FanWagn and now the Brand to Fan Show.
Keep going, Lauren. I'm behind you, and I'm so excited for you with FanWagn and the show here and everything else. Thanks so much for having me. And yeah, let's do it again some other time. We'll talk about different things. We won't talk about data. We'll talk more about fandom. Let's do it.
Okay, let's do it. I'm marking it down. Thanks so much.